I want you to close your eyes for a second.
Yeah.
Just picture yourself standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right in the middle of the busiest trading day of the entire year. It is loud, it's chaotic.
The energy is just, it's off the charts.
Exactly. People are shouting numbers, phones are ringing off the hook, and you see these heavy hitters, right? The billionaires making these massive, massive trades.
We're talking millions of dollars just moving in a split second.
Right, and everyone stops to watch.
Yeah.
Because it's impressive. I mean, it just screams power.
Well, sure, that's the sound of the economy working. Money talks and big money screams.
It really does.
Yeah.
But now, I want you to imagine that right in the corner of that incredibly chaotic room, while all these titans of industry are high-fiving over massive gains, a person walks in.
Okay.
And they quietly drop 2 pennies into a jar.
Just 2 pennies.
2 pennies.
Mm.
Nobody notices. Nobody cares. I mean, the janitor's probably sweeping around them.
Right. It's totally insignificant.
But then, the CEO of the entire system stops the trading floor, points right at that person, and says, "Stop everything. That person just invested more than everyone else combined."
Which, mathematically speaking, is absolute nonsense.
A little nonsense.
I mean, in any standard economy, saying something like that gets you fired immediately.
But that is exactly the scenario we are unpacking today. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, and today we are doing a deep dive into a text that takes our standard, everyday calculator, throws it completely out the window, and replaces it with an entirely different set of metrics.
It's great to be here, and yeah, we are looking at the story of the widow's mite. This is from the Gospel of Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 44.
And it is such a fascinating source text.
It really is, because it's a classic, right? It's usually taught as this very simple, very heartwarming story about generosity.
Like a Hallmark card kind of thing.
Exactly. Give a little, even if you're poor. But when you really look at the source material, the historical context, the specific Greek terms they use, the actual architectural setting of the temple, it is so much more volatile than that.
Volatile is a great word for it. It feels less like a sweet story and more like a collision between 2 completely different universes.
That is the perfect way to frame it. You have man's scale, which is all about quantity. It's about accumulation and the visible bottom line.
Right. The stuff we can measure.
Exactly. And then you have heaven's scale, and that operates on a metric that looks like bad math to us, but it's actually measuring something far, far heavier than gold.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out that math. We're going to look at the villains of the story, the setting of the temple treasury, which I learned from our notes is way more complex than just a donation bucket.
Oh, absolutely. The acoustics alone are incredible.
We'll definitely get into that. And finally, we'll look at this woman who completely breaks the system.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so before we even get to the widow and her copper coins, the text in Mark 12 actually sets the stage with a warning.
A very severe warning.
Right, and it's not subtle at all. Jesus is sitting in the temple, and he starts by pointing out a specific group of people, the scribes.
Yes, and this is what we might call the anti-pattern. Because if you really want to understand the hero of the story, the widow, you have to understand the villains first.
You need that contrast.
Precisely. And the text gives this very detailed, highly visual critique of these guys. It says, beware of the scribes.
The first thing that really jumped out at me in the source material was the fashion.
The fashion, yes.
The text literally says they love to go in long clothing. Now, I have to ask, is this just Jesus being the fashion police here?
Yeah.
What is the actual significance of long clothing?
It's definitely not about style. It is entirely about signaling.
It's signaling status.
Exactly. In that culture, long flowing robes were a massive status symbol. Practically speaking, just think about it. If you're wearing robes that drag all the way on the ground, can you plow a field in that?
No. You trip over yourself immediately.
Right. Can you build a stone wall? Can you do carpentry?
Not a chance.
No. So it signals to everyone around you, I do not do manual labor. It's like wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo to a construction site.
That paints a very clear picture.
It screams, I am important, I am distinct, I am completely above the daily grind. It's all about being seen and separating yourself from the common working class people.
And the text really doubles down on this need for attention. Because right after the close, it says they love salutations in the marketplaces.
Picture this. You're at the grocery store, right? You're just trying to buy some apples. Mind your own business.
Right.
These guys, they want to be stopped. They actively want the bow. They want the title. Rabbi or father, shouted out loud.
So everyone else in the produce section knows exactly who they are.
Exactly. It is a complete addiction to public prestige.
It sounds exhausting, to be honest.
It is a full-time job keeping up that kind of public image.
But it goes even further than just the market. The source material points out that they seek the chief seats in the synagogues and the uppermost rooms at feasts.
They need the VIP section, always.
So what does a chief seat actually look like in a first-century synagogue?
Well, the chief seats were usually a bench right at the front. But the key is they faced the congregation.
Oh, wow. So you're not looking at the speaker, you're looking at the audience.
And the audience is looking at you. So not only did you get the best view of the room, but everyone in the room was watching you the entire time they were supposed to be worshiping.
So even during a religious service, they are the show.
They are absolutely the show. It's a performance. But, and this is where the text takes a really dark turn, up until now, they just sound vain.
Yeah, a bit pompous. Maybe annoying to be around.
Right. But then the source material drops this absolute hammer. It says they devour widows' houses.
That phrase honestly stopped me in my tracks when I was reading the prep notes.
Yeah.
Devour widows' houses.
It's violent.
It is violent language. What does that actually mean in this context? Are they physically kicking down doors and taking their homes?
It's likely a reference to a system of guardianship. You see, in that society, a widow was incredibly legally vulnerable.
Because she didn't have a husband to handle the finances.
Exactly. No husband to handle legal matters or property rights. So often, a scribe, who was essentially a trusted religious lawyer, would be appointed as the executor or the guardian of her estate.
Okay, I think I see where this is going, and I really don't like it.
You shouldn't, because instead of protecting her assets, which was their job, they would often siphon them off.
How so?
They might charge exorbitant legal fees for their services. Or they might claim the house as payment for made-up debts.
Wow.
Or perhaps even convince the widow to donate her estate to the temple.
Which they just happen to manage.
Exactly, in exchange for spiritual favor. So they get the property either way.
That is predatory on a whole different level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are using their religious authority to essentially bankrupt the most vulnerable people in their entire society.
It is peak exploitation. And the sick irony here, the real twist, is that the text says they do this while making long prayers.
For a pretense. That's what the text adds. That's the key word, right? Pretense.
It means it's a mask. The
Yeah.
long, beautiful, perfectly articulated prayer is just cover fire for the massive corruption happening behind the scenes.
So you have this image of someone who looks incredibly holy on the outside.
The robes, the front row seats.
The perfect theology. But behind the scenes, they are effectively wolves.
And the judgment mentioned in the source is severe. It says, "These shall receive greater damnation."
Greater damnation.
Yes, the principle being laid down here is crystal clear. God is not fooled by the costume. Outward appearance does not equal inward righteousness.
It's a terrifying setup for what happens next, because Jesus has just meticulously described the people who look like they have the absolute most value to God, but actually have the least.
Right.
And then the scene completely shifts. He moves over to the treasury.
The geography really matters here. This scene likely takes place in what was called the Court of Women in the Temple.
Okay.
And historical sources tell us that along the wall in that court, there were 13 trumpet-shaped chests used specifically for collecting offerings.
Wait, trumpet-shaped, like the brass instrument.
Exactly like that. They were literally called the trumpets, or the shofars. They were made of bronze or heavy metal. They had this wide, flared opening at the top that narrowed down at the bottom into the actual collection box.
I am just imagining the acoustics of that, dropping metal into a metal funnel.
Yes. Think about the sound design of this specific moment. When you threw in heavy coinage like solid gold or thick silver coins, it would ring out.
It made a sound.
It made a very loud sound. A heavy bag of coins would create this loud rhythmic clatter as it spiraled down the metal neck of that trumpet.
So giving wasn't just visual, it was auditory.
Very much so.
You could literally hear how generous someone was being from across the courtyard.
You couldn't ignore it. So Jesus is sitting there, essentially just people watching. And the text notes that many who were rich cast in much.
And based on those acoustics, everyone in the vicinity knew it. Clink, clink, clink.
Like a slot machine paying out, but in reverse.
That's a great analogy.
Now, in man's scale, our standard way of measuring things, this right here is a massive success story. The treasury is getting full. The wealthy are actively supporting the institution.
If you were on the temple finance committee, you'd be absolutely
You'd be
thirsty.
high-fiving. You love these donors.
You'd be naming the metal trumpet chests after them, like, this is the Zechariah trumpet.
Exactly. But then the camera focus shifts completely. The text says, "And there came a certain poor widow."
Contrast is just everything here, isn't it?
It really is. We just spent all this time talking about scribes who devour widows' houses. And now, walking right into the frame, we see one of the victims. A widow who has, presumably, almost nothing left to her name.
She steps up to this giant metal trumpet, and the text says she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing.
Oh, right.
Now, I really need you to break this down for me. I do not know the current exchange rate on a mite, but I'm guessing we aren't even buying a cup of coffee with it.
Oh, not even close. The Greek word used in the original text here is lepton.
Lepton.
Yes. It literally translates to thin or peeled. It was the absolute smallest denomination of coin in circulation at the time. It was basically just a tiny, thin flake of copper.
How small are we talking? Could you give me a modern comparison?
Let's do the math based on a standard day's wage back then. A day's wage for a common laborer was a denarius.
Okay.
1 lepton was roughly 1/128th of a denarius.
Wow. Okay. So if a day's wage for us today is, let's say, $150,
Then a lepton is barely $1, maybe $1.20.
and she had 2 of them.
2 of them.
So she essentially has $2 to her name. In terms of purchasing power, that is literally nothing.
It's a rounding error. It wouldn't buy a meal. It certainly wouldn't put a dent in repairing the temple roof.
Right.
In the grand scheme of the multi-million-dollar temple budget, her contribution was statistically 0. And because those copper flakes were so incredibly light, they probably didn't even make a sound in the bronze trumpet.
Just silence.
Complete silence. To the human eye, she did absolutely nothing.
But this is where the deep dive gets really interesting. Because Jesus stops everything. He calls his disciples over. He basically makes a whole scene out of this tiny silent moment.
He does, and he gives the final verdict.
He says, "Truly I say unto you that this poor widow has cast more in than all those who have cast into the treasury."
Yes.
Hold on, I want to make sure I'm reading that right. More than all. Not just more than the rich guy standing next to her. More than the entire group combined.
That is exactly the phrasing. More than all they which have cast into the treasury.
Okay, so we really have to suspend our understanding of basic math here. Because 1 + 1 does not equal 1,000,000. How on earth does Jesus justify this calculation?
He gives us the exact formula in the very next verse. He says, "For all those who did cast in of their abundance. But she, of her want, did cast in all that she had, even all her living."
Abundance versus want. That's the variable that completely changes the equation.
Think about the physics of abundance for a second. Let's say you have a net worth of $10 million.
Must be nice.
Right. And you decide to give $10,000 to charity. That is a huge gift. Objectively, it buys a lot of bread. It helps a lot of people.
Absolutely.
But does it change your Tuesday?
No, not at all. I still go home to the exact same house. I eat the same steak dinner. My safety net is completely intact. I don't feel it.
Exactly. You gave out of your surplus. You essentially skimmed the cream off the top. It didn't cut into your actual substance.
It cost me money, sure. But
Right.
it didn't cost me my lifestyle.
Precisely. Versus the widow. The text says she gave out of her want.
Or out of her poverty.
Right.
Yeah.
And the phrase that really hits hard in the original Greek is when it says she gave all her living. The Greek word used there is bios.
Bios.
Yeah.
Like biology.
Exactly. She gave her bios. She gave her life.
She gave her life. That sounds incredibly drastic for dropping 2 coins in a box.
It means she gave the actual resources that sustain her physical life. She gave her dinner. She gave her security for the night. After those 2 little coins dropped into the silence, she had 0.
This brings up a really difficult question for me, though.
What's that?
Why give both? I mean, if she had 2 mites, why not drop one in the trumpet for God and keep one so you can buy a tiny piece of bread for yourself?
It's a fair question.
That's still a 50% giving rate, which is incredibly generous by literally any standard. Why go all the way to absolute 0?
Well, that's the perfectly logical human question, isn't it? Hedge your bets. Diversify your portfolio.
Keep a little back just in case things go bad.
Exactly. But she didn't do that. She went to 0.
Why? What actually possesses someone to do that?
This is where we move completely from economics into theology. It is all about where you place your trust. Think about it. If she keeps one single coin in her pocket, her security is still partially anchored to that coin. She's essentially saying, I trust God, but I also trust this little copper flake to save me tonight.
But by giving both of them away.
She is making a profound declaration. She's saying, my provider is not this metal. My provider is God. She completely severed the link between her money and her security.
Honestly, that is terrifyingly bold.
It really is, and it stands in such sharp, glaring contrast to the scribes we talked about earlier.
The ones in the long robes.
Right. They were actively accumulating everything: prestige, wealth, robes, devouring whole houses, all just to build this massive fortress of security around themselves.
They completely trusted in their position and their bank accounts.
Exactly. While she trusted in something completely invisible.
It is so interesting to connect those two segments of the text again. The scribes devour widows' houses, and then this literal widow comes along and gives her house, figuratively speaking, her living directly to God.
There's a really deep duality there. On one hand, it is the ultimate pure act of faith by this widow. On the other hand, a lot of scholars point out the deep tragedy of the moment.
The tragedy?
Yeah. Here is this highly corrupt religious system run by wealthy men in flowing robes, and it is willingly accepting the very last 2 pennies of a starving woman.
Oh, wow. That is a heavy perspective.
It is.
So is Jesus praising her faith, or is he actually condemning the system that takes her last cent?
The source material strongly suggests he is doing both simultaneously. He issues a severe judgment on the system that exploits the vulnerable. Remember, devouring widows' houses brings greater damnation.
Right.
But he also completely elevates the woman who, despite all the corruption around her, maintains a perfectly pure heart of sacrifice. The system is entirely broken, but her faith is completely perfect.
It really recontextualizes the whole idea of what a hero looks like in this kind of narrative.
Oh,
Well, the hero isn't the guy with a microphone. It's not the guy in the VIP seat or the fancy long robe. The hero is the completely invisible woman with the 2 cents.
Exactly. And this touches directly on the core truths listed in our source material. The first one being very simple. God is watching.
Yeah, that image of Jesus just sitting over against the treasury is really sticking with me.
He's just observing.
Right. He wasn't interfering. He didn't jump up and stop her hand from dropping the coins. He was just quietly watching the whole thing unfold.
He is the silent observer in the room, but he isn't just watching the coins drop into the box. The source makes a point to say God is weighing.
Weighing, like weighing the gold.
No, weighing the intent, weighing the actual sacrifice behind the gift. We as humans just see the action. We see the hand dropping the money. God actually sees the heart either breaking or fully trusting as that coin leaves the hand.
So the real lesson here is that God judges hearts, not public shows.
Exactly, not public performance. And the scribes, as we established, were entirely about the performance.
The salutations in the marketplaces.
That's a performance.
The long prayers in front of everybody.
Total performance. But the widow's act was barely even visible. I mean, think about it. If Jesus hadn't stopped everything and pointed it out, nobody, literally nobody on earth would have ever known she did that.
Honestly, she probably would have preferred that nobody noticed.
Very likely. She certainly wasn't doing it for the applause. There was absolutely no applause for dropping in 2 mites. She's doing it for an audience of 1.
Our source material puts it this way, and I love this quote. The poor widow gave very little in man's eyes, but she gave the most abundant in God's eyes.
It completely redefines the word abundance. Because true abundance isn't what you have sitting in your bank account. It's what you are actually willing to surrender.
It really makes you look at the whole concept of charity differently. We tend to think, I know I do this, we think, oh, when I finally have $1 million, then I'll be super generous.
Oh, sure.
I say that kind of thing all the time. If I won the lottery today, I'd go build a hospital tomorrow.
We all do that. We think generosity is just a byproduct of having wealth. But the text strongly suggests that if you aren't generous right now with your little mite, you are never going to be generous with your million.
Because generosity isn't actually a financial condition.
No, it's a heart condition. The widow didn't wait until she could finally afford to give. She gave straight out of her poverty.
That phrase from the text, she of her want did cast in, it really hits home. It is so easy to give when your fridge is completely full.
Very easy.
It's easy to write a nice check when you know for a fact your next paycheck is hitting the bank on Friday morning.
And that is what we'd call low-stakes giving. High-stakes giving, the specific kind of giving that actually seems to grab God's attention in this text, is giving when you honestly don't know where your next meal is coming from.
It's giving that hurts a little bit.
Yes.
The notes we have say it plainly. True generosity costs something.
If it doesn't actually impact you, if it doesn't cost you a little bit of comfort or a piece of your security, the text suggests it carries far less weight on heaven's scale.
It's just a transaction at that point.
Exactly. Sacrifice is what transforms a simple transaction into actual worship.
So let's zoom out a bit and look at the complete picture we've built here today. On one side of the room, you have the scribes. They are wealthy, respected, loud, wearing the colorful robes, occupying the very best VIP seats in the house.
But spiritually speaking,
Right.
Spiritually, they are completely bankrupt, and they are facing severe judgment. The text specifically says greater damnation.
And then on the exact opposite side, you have the widow. She is poor, ignored, totally silent, basically invisible to society. But in reality,
She is the greatest investor in the entire room. She's the only person who actually gave all.
it is the ultimate reversal of expectations. And it serves as both a warning and an invitation for the listener.
They hear it.
The warning seems pretty clear. Do not be impressed by the costumes and the long, fancy prayers.
Right. Don't ever mistake outward success for actual spirituality. Just because someone happens to have the chief seat doesn't mean they actually have God's approval. God sees the underlying motive.
And what about the invitation?
Well, the invitation is found right in the source's closing exhortation. Give God your all.
Give God your all. You know, it sounds so simple, like something you'd see on a bumper sticker. But as we've clearly seen with the widow today, all is a really scary word.
All is a total word. There's no wiggle room. It implies a complete loss of control. The widow didn't keep a backup plan in her pocket. She essentially gave the backup plan directly to God.
That is radical trust. It's almost reckless trust, really.
By human economic standards, it is completely reckless. But by kingdom standards, it's actually the only way to be truly safe.
How so? Explain that.
Because the source material implies that this specific kind of trust leads to an entirely different kind of reward. It says, your reward is in heaven. It suggests that the real return on investment here isn't getting a better seat in the synagogue next week. It's something eternal. It's shifting your ultimate security from a finite resource like money, which the scribes were obsessed with, to an infinite resource.
So if I'm understanding this core concept right, the scribes were desperately trying to secure their own lives through constant accumulation.
Correct. Accumulating honor, accumulating money, even accumulating widows' houses.
They were accumulators.
Yes.
And the widow, on the other hand, secured her life through total surrender.
She was a surrenderer, and in the very distinct logic of this biblical text, the surrenderer is the one who is actually truly saved.
Because if your security is just sitting in a bank somewhere, it could be stolen.
Or lost in a market crash, or completely devalued. But if your security is fully placed in God, exactly as the widow's demonstrated faith showed, it becomes completely untouchable.
That is an incredibly powerful place to land. We started this deep dive looking at 2 tiny little copper coins worth maybe $1 today. And we ended up with a complete overhaul of how we fundamentally view security and success.
It really just goes to show you, you cannot judge the true value of an action just by looking at its size. You have to measure it by the amount of sacrifice that was required to actually do it.
So here is the final provocative thought I want to leave everyone with today. Because it's easy to just listen to this and nod along. We all really like to think we are generous people.
Of course we do. We naturally grade ourselves on a curve.
We absolutely do. We think, oh, I'm doing better than that guy. But the text suggests that true security isn't found in a healthy bank balance. It's found in the willingness to trust all your living to a higher power.
Right.
So as you go about your week, I want you to ask yourself this. Just look at your own life. Are you simply giving out of your abundance, essentially just tipping God with whatever happens to be left over at the end of the month? Or are you giving in a way that truly, genuinely costs you something?
Because it's the stark difference between a simple donation and a true sacrifice. One of them is very easy to do. The other one completely changes who you are.
That is definitely something to chew on. Well, that wraps it up for this deep dive. Thank you so much for exploring this with me.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening. We will catch you next time.